I always start these talks out, and I haven't had a chair this small probably since grade school. So I'm going to move back and forth, and I'll do my best not to be blocking the screen. But I usually start these talks out with just a question, a couple of questions. So first of all, just show of hands. How many of you have heard about Pando before this? Oh, wow. Okay. How many of you have actually visited Pando or been to Fish Lake Basin? And okay, great. How many of you have heard a news story about Pando that leads you to feel concerned about its fate? All right, I got lots of great news today, and I shared with Joni, you all are going to be privy to a headline, a really exciting headline about Pando's care and protection for future generations today. Now what I'm going to do is, if you feel so bold talking in crowds, I want to hear about your favorite tree before we kick off, because this story starts out with me and a hickory tree as a young boy. So favorite tree, call out, maybe you had a tree in your yard, you just liked it. It wasn't about the species. You got a favorite tree?
English walnut tree in the backyard of the house. I've been there for 20 years on Water Lane. I call it the mother tree.
The mother tree. All right. All right. Anybody else? Favorite tree? What do you got?
I love anytime I'm up for the bristle cones.
Oh, yeah.
Just how ancient they are.
Yeah. Hang out afterwards. I do some work about bristlecone pine too. We got a lot of work to do there, ma'am.
We had a sycamore in my front yard growing up in Ohio. And
Ohio.
I climbed in that tree. I sat there with a book and an apple, and I was a little girl.
Yep.
And then we took pictures in front of it every year that we were home visiting my parents until they moved out of the house a year ago. So
Yeah.
you can see it getting huge over there.
Yeah. I happen to grow up in. Oh, you got a favorite tree back there? What's yours? Cedar trees. Okay. And I saw another hand over here. One more. What's yours? Oh, and they're blooming right now. That's great. That's great. So, you know, it's really easy to forget because of Pando's size and scale and the headlines and all the bad news that we get about where things are and how we have to take care of this place called Earth, our home, our spiritual home, our physical home. That Pando is a tree. And it happens to be one of my favorite trees, and that story actually starts in Ohio. So we should talk about bristlecone after this talk, and we should talk about Ohio. Bristlecone are the timekeepers of the world. Pando is not. It is 9,000 years old, but it does not grow the way that bristlecone do. Sycamore are kind of the original, I don't know, maybe I'm showing my roots a little bit here, but we had water witches in kind of rural Ohio. Those are people that could find places to drill wells. Sycamores are natural water, they'll tell you where the water is. So I'll go ahead and kick off into the talk. As I just shared, we've talked about favorite trees. I grew up in rural Ohio, southwestern Ohio. There was a hickory tree right on the edge of the property, and it kind of hung out over the road. And my mom's family, they were something called Bible Methodist. They didn't have a TV in their home, but we go to the library. And so I would get stacks of books and just climb up in that hickory tree, and it was kind of cool. It was perched out over the road. I felt like it was my little, secret pod to all things going on in a book or in the sky. I first visited Pando in 2017. The story of that you'll find in media outlets and things like that. So we'll get a little bit more into the meat of the matter of Pando today versus my biography. Suffice to say, my first experience with Pando, and after that I've been doing work to document endangered orphan trees, document folks that are doing work to protect and take care of them. In 2019, started work building community, grassroots style, in the Richfield community, which is the largest big city near Pando's homeland. And we just started having these calls. All of us would get on a call and we'd say, well, what if we do this? What if we do this? What if we do this? That led to a project that you'll be able to enjoy after this talk today, the Pando Photographic Survey, documenting the tree at the ground level, once every 7 meters, 8,542 locations. We make all of our data freely available. So right now, anybody from anywhere in the world can go experience Pando. Scientists can use it to see how the tree changes over time. Friends of Pando got started in 2021. We formed a formal partnership with the Forest Service in 2022. So why trees? Why photograph trees? You know, when I tell people what I do, you photograph trees. What? How do you make money at that? There's no money in that. But I get to be here. I love photographing trees because they're celestial trackers. It's real easy to forget that trees learn to eat the most abundant resource in all of God's creation, or otherwise, starlight. And they will follow the sun through the sky. Here, you have vine maple that are in the mid-canopy of the Quinault rainforest in Washington state. And so each of these branches has learned to move through that canopy over time to get the most sunlight coming through the canopy. Of course, in all the religions of the world, trees are mediators between earth and sky. This piece here is called the lightning sentinel, and this is a redwood tree in Northern California that's been struck by lightning. And you can just see a whole sort of ring of all the bark that got blown off when it got hit by a lightning strike. Trees are kind of the perfect dowsing rods for water and nutrients. Here in the Wichita National Forest, there's a tree and a creek that came through. That tree had been following that creek for probably decades, if not centuries. Trees as persistent navigators. Here, a spruce on the face of Mount Rainier has cracked through, just little by little as it's grown, really heavy basaltic rocks and tephra, and made its own home there on the face of Mount Rainier. Trees as intimate harbors of life. Here, another series I'm working on just in my creative work called Sequoia obscura. I figured out techniques and mastered a way to photograph the insides of coastal redwood trees, which turn out they're pitch black, but I figured out the lighting techniques to bring out all of the colors of life. You have fire scars, you have mosses and lichens and fungus and bug colonies, and all of this is going on inside the tree that most people go like this, and I had to see what it looks like on the smaller scale. So, intimate harbors of life. And then, of course, with Pando, Pando has been reinventing itself now, scientists estimate, for about 9,000 years. Pando is uniquely adapted, as we'll talk about, to thrive in the face of adversity. It's able to create complex connections and use that to reinvent itself again and again and again. It's just trees, though, right? They can do all of this, but it's just trees. And so I get really excited about that, and that maybe give you a little bit of an idea about how I got on this journey and what brings us here together today. So I try to make my talks not so much about the nonprofit stuff. As an executive director, I'm supposed to tell you we are a registered nonprofit recognized by the state of Utah, registered with the IRS, period. But what we're really focused on is our mission, which is Friends of Pando is dedicated and working to educating the public. We're here today, support research and preservation efforts, and inspire stewardship of Pando, the world's largest tree. We're going to get into why Pando is the world's largest tree here in a minute, but our ethos is really focused on what we call a boots on the ground philosophy. Practical conservation is what somebody described it as on one of our first field crews. And it's important because thus far, Pando's mainly been the domain of academia. And they aren't out in Pando summer over summer, year over year, doing, the boots and getting your hands dirty with the work that needs to be done to take care of and protect the tree. So from that practical conservation mindset, we work to educate and inform the public. We have friendsofpando.org. We have a YouTube channel. We'll soon to release a children's coloring book. It's a fundraiser. You'll be able to buy that on Amazon. We have another free children's education program. We do needed monitoring, research, and preservation work. We'll touch on that a little bit later, too. We work with the land management agencies, so formally partnered with the U.S. Forest Service, Fish Lake National Forest, informally partnering with Utah DNR, DWR, in addition to other wildlife and conservation groups out there. We assist scientists in a couple of ways to advance Pando's study and care. We are an open science organization, unlike many of the academic institutions here in the state of Utah, scientists, data is currency. We make all of our data freely available. So it's safe for people to go out, get that data, where Pando is really expensive to study, it's huge. But also, anybody can go look at that data and figure out in their own way, maybe it guides a research project. So open science, citizen science, really important. We create opportunities for artists, and we advocate for Pando's care and protection. So I already kind of touched on this earlier today, but I wanted to add a question here. Just a show of hands, how many of you have tried to get rid of a problematic aspen? Okay, all right. So we'll just kick off there and say news of Pando's demise has been greatly exaggerated, to pull a quote from Mark Twain. Pando's been at it for about 9,000 years. If you've not been out to Fish Lake before, just kind of let your eyes rest on this here. This is a photo, and I don't know if y'all can see it very well in the back there, but this is taken at 10,300 feet, about roughly 700 to 1,000 feet above Pando's homeland. We're looking to the due west. And can you see anything in particular? Maybe the folks in front might be able to. Not anything, yeah, you kind of see it. So people get really excited about this time of year, in spring in particular, but if you see the outline, that's Pando. And you can clearly see Pando's outline each spring because all the trees around it send off their leaves. They're all on their own calendar. And then again in winter or heading towards fall, all the trees change their color before Pando. This led to Pando's discovery. Yes?
Can you go back to that first picture now?
Yeah, before and after?
Okay.
I'm just glad you can see it. It looks really fuzzed out over here. So, everybody good? You ready? So, Pando. We'll go back and forwards a little bit here, but let's kind of start with the key things, and I promised you some insights here. Pando is the world's largest tree by weight. Dry weight estimate 13.2 million pounds. Pando is also the largest tree by land mass, any tree. Pando is the largest aspen clone in the world. The next largest is maybe 47 acres in Michigan. Pando is the largest tree confirmed by genetic testing. Pando also figures as one of the oldest living trees. It's estimated that Pando's root system has been active, and since it reproduces by sending new shoots up from the root through a hormonal process, which you can learn more about on our YouTube channel, it figures as one of the oldest living trees, older than the oldest bristlecone, oldest than the oldest redwood trees. There's a few other clones, one in California. It's a form of oak, and it comes in around 10,000. But Pando then is part of this family of trees at the 9, 10, 11,000 mark of history. That's right after the last glaciers receded, right? Pando's homeland would have been too cold to be older than even 12,000 years old, but a misconception you see in media a lot is that it's 80,000 years old or 1,000,000 years old. This is based on a morphological model that's been debunked and has been debunked for about 40 years. This is a whole other strategy of research from the 1980s. And so one of the things that we were able to do, for example, is the National Park Service had some of that information on their website, and we gave them the data and said, hey, look, please remove that, because the problem is people just assume that it'll be around forever and we'll just hang out. So it's like there's all these extremes. It's like, oh, it's been around forever, it's going nowhere, or it's dead. And usually that extreme thinking is usually a sign that nobody's working the middle. And so we try to disabuse people of other misconceptions. So we'll get into that here now. Just to kind of give you some more ideas about Pando's scale of operation, the wet weight estimate. We've been working on data points like this now the past couple of years, 70 million pounds. The root system, just a rapid field estimate, suggests that Pando's root system could span, if you put them all end to end, 12,000 miles. That's halfway around the world. They're all interconnected together. They share nutrients, water, defense mechanisms, hormones that spur more regeneration. Last year, we put together a model, 1 billion leaves gathering enough sunlight to power 70,000 homes each year. Pando captures 2.8 million gallons of water for 1 inch of rain that falls on its landmass. 2.8 million gallons of water. And then, of course, it puts out its leaves, and when those leaves fall and the branches fall in autumn, Pando can produce 900 pounds to upwards of 4,000 pounds of biomass. So it's literally feeding itself over time. So some more big numbers, some more bigger ideas about Pando. Many of the things you've heard or saw in the news about Pando today is really about the fact that Pando was only discovered in 1976 and was only confirmed via genetic testing in 2008, which means we didn't really confirm Pando's size or scale of operation until about 16 years ago. Pando's homeland is now the land of the Paiute people. So before we get into this, I think we have to touch a little bit on the colonial period. And I think it'll be an interesting story for some of you that are doing other work like Great Salt Lake and what have you. But so far as we've been able to tell in our work, doing outreach with Paiute people, Fremont, other groups, we don't have any legends or myths of Pando that we can refer to or even verify the quality of an oral history. And this is because a guy named Arthur V. Watkins basically routed them and went into their lands. They just got constitutional authority back in the 90s, and they're doing a lot of great work, but we don't have any of that sort of hidden history, which is interesting because Pando's homeland, meaning the Fish Lake Basin, has been used by humans for 10,000 years as hunting grounds and at least 1,100 to 1,500 years as a summer retreat, agriculture grounds, which brings us up to the European colonial era. Fish Lake was set aside as part of the Forest Reserve System by William McKinley in 1899. And for those of you that have done work on the Great Salt Lake, what I want to point out here is that this predates really closely Utah's formation as one of the United States. And it was the people that got together around Fish Lake. We'd had grazing disasters, literally hundreds of thousands of sheep and cattle just mowing all of that land down, including Pando. The water was spoiled and everybody was fishing and using the water, right, before sanitation like we have today. And they basically lobbied, they went to the federal government and said, hey, please protect this freshwater lake. It's all we got. So take that to heart with some of the other work that you're doing is something me and Joni talked about. Pando's homeland in the same year, Pando's homeland was set aside for recreation. That's Fish Lake Basin there, part of the Fish Lake National Forest. And it did not have a name, but the first scientific document of Pando's discovery comes out in 1976. It just happens that they happen simultaneously, but there's no relationship between the two. So something we get asked a lot and something I like to talk about is the fact that we're lucky that Pando is not on private land or wilderness lands, things like that, where it does need our help. We're very lucky that it's on recreation land. And so Burton Barnes and Jerry Kemperman discovered the tree flying over. Again, they could see the outline just as you have today. And in 1987-88, the Forest Service begins a program to begin to protect and restore the tree. Now, if you have an aspen in your yard, you know if you chop down one, you might get a sucker up from another. In a nutshell, that's restoration work. We have a lot more. It's more complicated with Pando, but that's the gist of it. We need to remove juniper. We need to remove conifers, open up the ground, and then keep protections in place because Pando is surrounded by about 700 square miles of de facto wildlife refuge. That's why we have the fences. They are controversial to some people, but we can lose the largest and one of the oldest organisms on Earth, or we can try to manage land that's overseen by 5 different agencies that don't have Pando at heart. Unfortunately, that's a bitter pill for some folks. As I shared earlier, genetic verification comes in 2008. As it stands today, 53 acres of Pando's roughly 106-acre landmass is protected by these 8-foot fences. Those fences were actually not altogether properly installed Those were not fixed until 2019. So something else to keep in mind if you hear a story about Pando is some of the estimations about its decline were based on inadequate protection systems. So 53 acres today. Right after that project, 2013, 2014, the Forest Service goes in. They add some other core protective systems, which they later update. Scientists go out and they say, hey, the fencing's working. It's controlling deer and elk. It's controlling other uses of the land. This is great. Then all of a sudden, 2018 to 2021, and we'll touch on these controversies, Pando's dying. It's dead. It's all over. Here's a tree that's been around for 9,000 years, and in 3 years, we humans decided we knew everything about it after knowing it for 16 years, and say, after 3 years and a drought condition, it's dying, it's dead, it's over, it's broken. So we'll touch on that. So that kind of brings us up to today. Save the little tidbit you get there at the end. So I'm going to talk, and I'll kind of go through this a little more quickly. I'll be here afterwards to answer more questions. But Pando's root system is all interconnected. Do little trees get off and broken off? Yeah, but they're still Pando. They're still operating where the water, nutrients, and soil are all suited to Pando's advance over the land. The word or the name Pando is Latin for eye spread, and that's for the way that the tree can make advantage of like every calamity. A landslide, Pando can go in there, send up new shoots, and those shoots can be 9 feet tall in 3 years. Boom. Way faster than any conifer can do. These sort of highways, a very popular book, and we get this question a lot, is, is Pando the mother tree? Pando actually is male because aspen are either, they're dioecious, they'll be male or female. Pando happens to be male, so it produces pollen. It's producing pollen here shortly for this year. It's very likely that in Pando's homeland there are sons and daughters of Pando, but it's really expensive to get that data out. And it's not like scientists are clamoring to go to this tree and collect some genetic data and then go to this tree and hope that they match. It's really arduous work. But let's talk a little bit about what makes Pando unique. Obviously, we touched on the root system. The next thing is the leaves. The leaves connect at angles that deflect wind. The leaves have a waxy covering. This is a critical adaptation for Pando. The crowns grow tall and high. They drop their branches. This protects Pando from fire in one way. Those hot, heavy crown fires don't tend to do so well, which brings us to the next point. In Canada, aspen trees in general, this is a charred aspen tree above Pando and above its homeland. Aspen in Canada are called the asbestos forests. They literally use them as natural fire breaks because they're water-heavy trees. And so they'll singe in a low to medium fire, but you'll get lots of regeneration at the ground level because it changes how the soil composition. So they have some natural fire retardant abilities, and why Pando is there and pretty much roots out any other conifers almost to the exception of itself is because there's something else that Pando can do, and that's where you see this kind of wintry scene. Pando has chlorophyll in its bark. When its leaves fall in the autumn, it's still producing energy, and it's storing it in that massive root system so that this time of year, when the waters kick up and we start seeing the snow melt come down, you're talking about millions of gallons of water and all the sugars Pando has produced over winter, boom, it flourishes, it goes up. It takes a few weeks for it to happen, but it kind of happens all at once. It's almost like somebody flicks the switch and you're seeing in slow motion all of those trees start to begin their flourish. So another quality that makes Pando unique and makes it uniquely adapted to its homeland. We've kind of talked about the human history of the land. I've already mentioned that, we have archaeological records going back 10,000 years. Vachel Carter did some work in Fish Lake suggesting that they were doing summer crops that were fire-hungry crops like amaranth, where you set fire and they like it, it makes them go. Maybe as recently as 1,100 years ago, that would have been great for Pando. So there is always this relationship between humans and Pando. It's not like we discovered this thing on the bottom of the ocean or we discovered this single tree way on the side of a mountain. Pando is 47,000 trees that are all working together and connected through this main root system. We kind of talked about the questions and controversies, and it's really early, but you'll know something leaving today that nobody else will have known leaving this room. Pando is not dying. I'm sure I will get some hate mail when we put this on YouTube, but the reason why is there's 4 things we need to know, and we just don't know yet. And that the first is, has the hormone cycle stopped? Has Pando quit producing suckers? No, it has not. And that's why I asked, anybody try to kill an aspen before? It's really hard. Second, do we see encroachment by conifer? And indeed, we see like juniper bushes on the ground, but they're just taking advantage of a lot of the lava rock. Pando's very treacherous. Everybody that wants to go there, they're like, oh, it'll be, you know, dancing in the glade of trees. And it's like, no, you'll fall on your face. It's lava rock. It will hurt the whole time. So these juniper bushes love that, and Pando does too. They compete for each other. So we can tilt in their favor. The juniper, of course, is pernicious. It's okay to remove that. But do we see other conifers coming in? There's literally maybe a handful of conifers that have gotten to any height or scale. We don't have giant Douglas firs or spruce. I think our latest LiDAR data showed maybe 5 trees that were really big and mature and gnarly. And we do want them to come down. And the reason is simple. We want to favor Pando in that way. And the other reason is, too, that their leaves have silica and they can build up aluminum in the soil, and Pando would not like that. The trees will not survive. Pando is starving those trees out. If they've made it very long at all, they're usually less than this big around. Maybe that took them 40 years because Pando is just soaking and pulling out all the nutrients, water. It commands all the light that comes through the tree. So we don't see that level of encroachment. We don't see conifer taking over, which would be a sign that Pando's soil is not good. Then that brings me to the next point. There is a model showing its chemistry, so I don't want to bore you all with that on a lazy Sunday afternoon here, but there's a relationship between the aluminum, which is like, you know, on the periodic chart, aluminum and calcium, and they naturally repel each other. But in Pando soil, we did some very preliminary studies to prepare for some more long-term study in Pando's care, looking at soil qualities. We don't see a lot of aluminum in the soil, and that would kind of be a death now. We see a lot of calcium, which suggests that Pando, just our soil samples look like about 6,000 years of almost like pure calcium in the soil. You know, if you do gardening, you'll look at the potting soil. So that's a really good sign. And then the last thing is, people have tried to guess how many new stems Pando is sending up, you know, year over year. But we don't know, and this is really important, we don't have an expected rate of regeneration model for Pando. You know, it's like if we were just learning about how a human child grows, we would have no idea that it could grow to be 84 feet tall instead of 6 feet tall, which we know. We don't even have that basic insight on Pando. We don't know if it's supposed to send 1,000 suckers per acre each year or not. The best numbers we got is 400 to 500, but when we talk to folks that have worked on the Pando issues going back to the 80s, nobody can point us to the actual plot counts that say that Pando should be producing at a certain rate. So if we don't have an expected rate of regeneration, how do we know how to gauge death, dying, sustaining, self-sustaining health? We need to fill in those blanks. Is Pando breaking apart or shrinking? Here, there's a number of ways to think about it, but what I just want to impress upon you, Pando is not static. It's been moving back and forth across the land for thousands of years. It has survived conflagrations that have leveled it to the ground only to reinvent itself from the roots. So this language of shrinking, dying, breaking apart is kind of contentious. We need to be really careful with that assertion, because either we're saying Pando that we have can only be 106 acres and nothing more, or Pando that we have is living and dynamic, and we're being invited to listen in a different way. And so what's really unfortunate is a lot of these kind of misconceptions come about because folks in the media, they're not used to reading botany papers. And so they copy and paste some things and they think, oh, this is great. And it frankly distresses people, because Pando is amazing in its own right. You could just go sit on, you know, I like to go sit against the trunk of the tree and enjoy it. Land management, another big issue here in the state of Utah in particular. So the U.S. Forest Service does not manage game or wildlife in Pando's homeland. And as we talked about, the fencing is there to protect Pando from overbrowsing by deer and elk. Again, the U.S. Forest Service has no dominion over deer and elk in Pando's homeland. That is Utah DNR and DWR, and we do work with them. But a lot of these headlines and things that you've seen never mention the fact that actually they're talking to one agency that has absolutely no control or command. They know what's happening, but they can't do anything, and another agency that is maybe not getting all they need to take care of Pando because they think of Pando's homeland as 45,000 square acres. Pando is 106 of that. And so that's another big misconception, and that kind of touches on the big, small, big thing. So I've already touched on the need for fencing and restoration work. Pando has not got all the fencing and protection that it's needed to date, and the restoration work in the tree has been spotty. The Forest Service has really wanted partners, really wants to get Utahns more involved with Pando's care, protection, study, enjoyment, and use. But it's been spotty, it's been touch and go. Some of that is where, you know, we have these really talented scientists that are doing really exciting research, but they're not hanging out in Pando day over day. The Forest Service has been looking for a Friends of Pando group and folks like ourselves to come out. Maybe you can come out for a day. Maybe there's something you can do that a ways. And so when we talk about the protections and restoration, the protections only do us any good with deer and elk. They do not help us with the work we need to do to kind of take care of Pando like our garden, like a crop in a lot of ways. We have to do the restoration work to open up the ground so that new shoots will come through. We need to understand what soil quality. We need to understand water. We can only do that once the protections are in place because, as the Forest Service found in the early 1990s, the deer just came in, got all this great new regeneration and growth and everything going on in Pando, and the deer mowed it down in 6 weeks. Just gone. And so we can only do the restoration work and set the stage for a different future for Pando if we go through the hard part, which is we got to fence it first, which some people have criticized as being zoo-like. But again, 700 square miles all around Pando, you got to make a choice here. We can't do the restoration work without the fencing. So there is an anthropologist that I really like, and I want to kind of use this as an inspiration and a closing point here, and I'll talk a little bit and give you that great bit of news. I'm going to read this all in full. I don't always do this in presentations. Wade Davis, he's Canadian. Look him up sometime. Does amazing work. He's a National Geographic fellow. But he has this idea in anthropology called the ethnosphere. The sum total of all thoughts, dreams, myths, ideas, inspirations, intuitions brought into being by the human imagination since the dawn of consciousness. Think about how old Pando is. The ethnosphere is humanity's greatest legacy, a symbol of all we are and all that we can be as an astonishingly inquisitive species. A fully conscious species able to ensure that all peoples and all gardens find a way to flourish. I'm getting chills as I say that. A way to find that all people and all gardens find a way to flourish. Previous Friends of Pando, people have been doing hard work to try to understand this wonder in our backyard here. But now things are starting to come together where we can find ways to take care of each other and take care of this garden of Pando in a different way. And so, how do we see that? Some of you may have seen, anybody see the movie, the Disney movie, Strange World? Did you see Strange World? Disney movie? Cartoon? Anybody? Kids? You've seen it? Pando figures as a character in that. And my wife was like, are they talking about our tree? And I'm like, yeah, they're talking about, I'm taking notes as we speak. In 2006, Pando was the subject of a postage stamp. Any of you here read the Overstory? Pando features as a central character, and it's a character who is hard of hearing deaf. My great-grandparents were both deaf. We spoke ASL at my house growing up. And so I think that's the best representation for me. This is Jeff Rice. Maybe you heard the sounds or the underground sounds of the world's largest living thing or the largest tree last year on NPR. Jeff Rice he helped found the Acoustic Atlas. He developed the methods working with us to document Pando's subterranean soundscape, meaning It sounds like a superhighway of water and animals and insects and bugs that had never been documented, and it's important to bring up because by documenting it, we can start to look at water and root systems in a whole different way that we can't really do. We can't dig up the tree and go, what's the root look like? But we can hear the root working. There to the far right is Kirk Henriksen. He's here in SLC. He was our pilot artist in residency. So people bringing their creativity and their curiosity and wonder is part of that wayfinding. Making new connections. So we have both formal and informal partnerships. U.S. Forest Service, we worked with Snow College, Richfield on the Pando photographic survey. We still work with them on some of the monitoring and survey data and engineering those rigs to take care of Pando in a different way. Obviously, I mentioned Utah DNR. Right here in Salt Lake City, there's a small third-generation family-owned business named Pando Coffee, and they heard about our Pando Ambassador program, where we go out and do all the monitoring work, hiring local kids. And they were like, hey, we want to sponsor the program. So I get to go visit with them tomorrow, and it'll be the first year that they're our sponsor for that program. EJ Philanthropies is based out of Washington, D.C., and they have been doing work related to Pando for like decades. They are Pando maniacs, and they've been supportive and very kind to the idea that we're just getting everything moving and on the ground, right? We talked about boots on the ground, hands in the dirt. We monitor wildlife, bats, hummingbirds, mountain lions, bears. These are all things that consider Pando part of their homeland. Preliminary soil studies, got a lot more work to do there. We passively monitor recreation use, so we can go out and look at things like soil compaction or use strategies that have been used to protect other special trees across the U.S. We maintain the fencing, we fix those. We do large-scale mapping and landscape modeling programs, and we open source all of that so scientists can use that to study Pando from anywhere in the world. They can take the 360-degree photos we took of Pando and put that with a map, and they could literally go to that exact location, look at fungal bodies, look at how much regeneration is there year over year from anywhere in the world. We talked about open science. The other thing is, we all have a favorite tree regardless of our political background or leanings or ideas or philosophies, but I think it's really important that when we look at kind of conservation writ large, it's real easy to kind of get in tangles there, but everybody has a favorite tree, and if Pando's your favorite tree, I don't care how you vote or how you spend your money, if you can contribute. And we're fortunate in that way that Pando does bring people together where other conservation causes can be a lot more contentious. There are some tough decisions to be made, and anytime I see that, we've always tried to say positive about how we can bring people together and keep people working together. I know immediately, as probably you all know here, that when things are getting contentious, it's because somebody doesn't feel like they're being listened to. Anytime I tell somebody about the work that I do with Pando, they're like, cool, where can I learn more? It's like the easiest thing in the world. And so we try to stay positive, and we try to find new ways to bring folks together of all stripes, because Pando belongs to everybody. Not just me, not just my philosophy or other folks. It belongs to everybody. So did any of you watch the State of the State, the governor's talk in January this year? I think it was on TV locally. Did you watch it? So in the first few minutes of his talk, the governor of Utah actually mentioned Pando. Boy, that's like, wow, where did that come from? And it turns out that it was his leadership and the work of a local representative named Carl Albrecht that we were asked as an organization to advocate for a protection model for Pando to kind of get things on the road. So what I'm really glad to share with you here today is that indeed the state of Utah has set aside $250,000 to bring that much of Pando into permanent protections. Not Friends of Pando. They're not handing, this isn't your tax dollars going to Friends of Pando. This is the state of Utah committing to Pando in a way that's nothing short of historic. So again, I'm getting chills here, but that wasn't just what Lance thought, or the right, or the left, or this party or that party. It was, gosh, we got something this amazing out there and it just needs some fencing. Where do we sign up? That's it? Everybody knows how to build a fence out there. And if you get to come out to Pando, which I hope you will sometime, you'll see we got all kinds of folks that Some folks want to get their hands dirty. Some folks want to work the hospitality table. Some folks are the philosophers, the poets, the artists. They want to talk and dream. All of these are appropriate responses to living in a world where Pando is possible. So the other part of being an executive director is you get to the end and you're just kind of thinking about, oh gosh, what is it if you are inspired or moved by Pando, if this is the first time that you've met the tree or heard about the tree or you're wondering what you can do, I try to give you some things that you might be able to do without seeming solicitous, but it's going to be solicitous. I am not a natural fundraiser. I just will say that as a human being. I just think we should take care of Pando because it's possible. It's here. So here's things you can do. You can volunteer. You can volunteer in the field or you can volunteer remotely. Friends of Pando really got underway during COVID. We've never been afraid of remote work. We have scientists and artists and administrators that bring their talents to bear from all over the world. We have HR staff that gets them through that process. We can record their hours, and we really throw a light. Some of the work we need to do is really specialized. So if you're really specialized, great. If you're a generalist, great. But you can work remotely or you can work in the tree. Of course, you can write your state and federal representatives and tell them, hey, I heard about Pando. Here's what I think we should be doing. And you can't get it wrong. If we're doing anything after this kind of stop and start of, really 40 years, now we're kind of trying to get to cruising altitude with protections and restoration, right? Write those folks a letter. You can make a tax-deductible donation. I want to give you an idea of how little money it takes to take care of Pando each year. Once these protective systems are in place, we estimate that we've got about 3 years of really intensive restoration work. We worked with the Forest Service on kind of a sketch. This is not an official statement, but a sketch. How much would it cost to hire seasonal workers from the Forest Service to do the restoration Pando needs? $14,000 a year. Small amounts of money. So small, in fact, some of the projects we do, the Forest Service is like, gosh, that's it? Oh, yeah, it's just here. But what we do with our donations is we try to create opportunities for natural resources students in and around Pando's homeland, working with grazer organizations, working with families who have been on those lands for 120 years, right? So $14 a month, if you made a recurring donation, equals $168 over the course of a year. That settles 1 day of field work in Pando. So a recurring donation. A one-time donation, we can also do trust and things like that. You have to talk to our team about that, but we can do that. If you own a business, become a sponsor. We need small businesses supporting Pando. That's what we have now. We need to build on that. If you know an artist, send them our way. We select 3 artists each year, a national, a regional, and a local artist that'll go and work in Pando for a few days, a few weeks, and create original works over the course of a year. So send them our way. If you have children or grandchildren, I don't have any of the coloring books today, but we do have a coloring book that we freely distribute. And then there'll be a new Kids for Pando coloring book that should be out on Amazon. Our team was getting that ready. It was supposed to come out, I think, Friday, maybe next Friday. We are going to add a Kindle book. If you want to kind of get more into the weeds, we cover it here. You can buy that. It's strictly a fundraiser. We keep all of our materials freely available, but it's a fundraiser. So those are some other ways that you could help out. I'm concerned that I went a little long, but I wanted to be thorough because we are filming. But this is usually the time where I say, with gratitude to all the folks that have helped Friends of Pando get along the way. I want to thank Joni Furlong. I'd like to acknowledge Tony Harrell. She is a community liaison. She's based here in SLC, and she'll be here. We can do some general Q&A, but if you want to have fellowship beyond that, meet Tony. Tony would be another way you might be able to connect with other folks in the larger community if you want to do more on Pando. Maybe just host a talk in your living room. That's okay. We have a whole list of things you can do. So thank you to Joni, and if there's any questions, I'll try to answer the best I can here. If you're in a hurry to go, you can always email us, and we'll hang out and have fellowship after. So questions? Oh, goodness, everywhere. Oh.
Let's take a few, and then
Yeah.
to respect everyone's time, let's limit it to just a few, and then
Defer to
we'll
you.
wrap it up, and then they'll be available to come and talk to you. Okay?
Yes.
I'd like to visit, but we're kind of new in Utah. And
Sure.
Did I hear
that this is like 10,000 feet. So
Yeah.
there's still snow there now. And
The snow's starting to come off. The last snowpack report was about 12 inches. But Utah Highway 25 was literally built right through Pando before its discovery. There's a road that goes through the tree, didn't kill the tree. A whole road. And it didn't even hurt. Yeah. So, yeah, you can visit Utah Highway 25.
What would be the result if President Joe Biden declared this a national monument?
Well, I can't really talk about a presidential election, but what I can tell you is that when you look at Forest Service lands versus national monuments versus national parks, the management models vary. We have and we are in talks to look at which model might apply best if we think about taking care of Pando long term, but that's regardless of who's in office. These models have been around since the 70s. So we've looked at things as simple as keep it in Forest Service hands or help them by setting up what's called a special management area. These are really thorny kind of bureaucratic processes, but thankfully they don't necessarily require a president inveighing at that level. I can say that. Yes, ma'am.
So did you say there's about 47,000 individual trees? So isn't it kind of confusing to people that say the tree when there's like
Very.
all these trees?
Very, and I'm glad you bring that up. In another version of this, I talk about it. Humans have whole societies that are against clones, the duplicate. Like you sign your signature, you don't want anybody being you, right? But plants are really good at using clone strategies. So folks do get kind of tangled up on that. It's part of the big, small, big problem. It's like, is it one tree or a bunch of trees? They don't understand that it's all related, and that's because it's underground that you could see that relationship. That's why I always point folks to that outline in my talk. Yeah.
Somebody was telling me when I was there that somebody was really mad that they're looking for the tree.
Everybody is. We have a YouTube video on that very question. Could you find the center of Pando? And the simple answer is about 9 to 12,000 years ago, yes. Today, we have no idea. It's just all, it's kind of, you have to think about it like, it's like you kept self-replicating over all of history and time. When somebody met you, they wouldn't know that you ever could have looked any differently, right? Just for what's above ground. But you've literally just been growing the same part of yourself again and again. And in that way, it's always been you. And that's a really interesting kind of philosophical challenge that people like, but also get hung up on. How are we on time? Yes, ma'am.
there's a group of trees invested in the form of heart.
Oh, Heart of the Aspen, yeah.
And what makes that not get destroyed with the roots? If it's shooting up roots, how come the heart never? I've seen it in the last 10 years, and it still holds its shape.
Yeah, you mean like, what is it that it stays that particular shape for a period of time? So if you think about Pando as like somebody that put their foot down on the ground, and just imagine the ground is way bigger than any of us, once those roots kind of settle in, they become part of the land. And so they may go off to the left or right a little bit here and there, but they're going to kind of concentrate their energies where it's easier to transport. So it'll hold that shape for a while, but it will change in time. There was a researcher that suggests that trees, like if you have a grove of trees, and Pando is not a grove, that's not right. It's not a forest either. It is a tree. A tree just boggles the mind, but he estimated that a grove or a forest of trees moves about 5 meters a century. So the heart may be bigger and, 100 years, it may be gone. It may just shift. And that's why I say Pando's always changing shape and size. We need to be real careful that we not lose sight that Pando's in a living dynamic just like we are. How are we?
I think that we should probably wrap it up.
All right.
So I want to thank Lance. What a fascinating connection.
Thank you. Thank you.